Hello, how's it going? I hope you're all very well. Today I'm going to talk about some recent TV shows and films that I've been watching and really enjoying, because to be honest, I probably spend more time watching TV than I do reading books. First up on my list is Alias Grace. This is a Netflix adaptation of the Margaret Atwood book of the same name. It's based on a real historical event in Canada where two servants, Grace Marks and James McDermott, were accused of murdering the owner of the house they worked in and the housekeeper, who was also in a relationship with the master of the house. The show is specifically about Grace Marks, and it starts off with her having served several years in prison, but because of her good behaviour, she gets to go every day to help clean the house of a person who thinks that she's innocent and is trying to get her set free from prison. He brings in a doctor called Dr. Jordan, who is kind of a therapist, and he tries to talk to Grace to get her to tell the truth of what happened, because she states that she cannot actually remember what happened when the murders took place. I read the book Alias Grace ages ago and absolutely loved it, and I wasn't sure how they would adapt it because it's quite a wordy book and it's very much from the point of view of Grace Marks. So we get to see the story that she tells to Dr. Jordan, and then also her thoughts alongside that show she's not entirely telling the truth. And they did this, of course, through narration, and sometimes narration can get a bit gimmicky, but I think they used it really well in this show and it didn't get tedious. I love that they kept the ambiguity of the book in this show. So in the book you never really know whether Grace Marks actually did the murder or not. You never really know whether she actually can't remember what happened or whether she's just saying that. And the story isn't really about whether she did the murder or not. It's more about the way that women are treated and all the roles that are pushed onto them regardless of what they've done. So at the beginning of the show, she talks about how she's been called many names such as murderous, deceitful, promiscuous, but also confused and innocent. And it really plays upon the idea that women are somehow innocent and could never do anything like murder someone, but then they're at the same time they're also evil witches. Sarah Gadon plays Grace Marks and she does an absolutely amazing job, especially as she's doing a Northern Irish accent the whole way through and she's actually Canadian. She gets to act out the different versions of Grace, so when the different versions of the stories are presented, Sarah Gadon actually acts out a version of Grace where she does do the murder, a version of her where she's just an accomplice forced to help James McDermott, and a version where she isn't in the room at all when the murders take place and just simply lets them happen. And she does an amazing job of convincingly portraying Grace as all three, so that ambiguity is really maintained. I feel like the character of Grace Marks is probably one of the most complex female characters that's been presented on screen in a long time, because of being able to act out all those different versions of Grace and all of them feeling like they could be her. So Sarah Gadon's acting in the lead up to the murders, where she does remember everything that happens, convinces us that either of those things could have taken place. The production as well is stunning. I love all the costumes, and I love how, especially in the latter part of the series, you could really feel the heat and the tension in the house where the murders eventually do take place. Next on my list is an Australian TV show called Rosehaven. The first series came out last year and currently they have both series on iView. This show is created by comedians Celia Piccola and Luke McGregor, and they both star in it, as well as best friends Daniel and Emma. So in the first series, Daniel is going back to visit his mum in Tasmania because she's ill, and he's looking after her real estate business, as he's also a real estate agent, while she recovers from an operation. And Emma is about to get married, but when she's on her honeymoon, her husband leaves her, so she goes to Tasmania to visit Daniel instead, and eventually just ends up staying there. For me, this is the best Australian comedy that's been created since The Hollow Men, which is a totally different show anyway. It consistently makes me laugh, and every half-hour episode is such a neat, well-written story in its own, as well as sort of building up to an overarching story. It has a very gentle sort of PG comedic style, which I really love. It kind of reminds me of British shows like Doc Martin, because it is set in a village in Tasmania and the residents are kind of nutty, so a lot of the humour arises from Emma and Daniel meeting these people. But then the other humour as well is the banter between Daniel and Emma, and I think those are the bits that I love the best because the script there is so perfect. It's also beautifully shot with with amazing panoramas of the Tasmanian landscape. I think that's why it feels a bit different from your average Australian comedy, not that we have many anyway, because Tasmania is so different from the mainland, and they also film it in winter, so it's cold, so everyone's like rugged up in coats, and it's a very winter aesthetic as opposed to the kind of more summer vibe that most Australian shows seem to go with. Another very gentle comedic show that I've been enjoying is Detectorists. This is a British show starring Mackenzie Crook, who is in The Office and Pirates of the Caribbean, and Toby Jones, who was the voice of Dobby, and he's been in lots of other stuff as well. They play Andy and Lance, who are detectorists, which are people who detect for metal and gold with metal detectors in fields. And the premise sounds very boring, but it is actually so funny. The humour doesn't come so much from the stories, but from the banter between Lance and Andy, and then also the other characters in the village are all a bit nutty as well, so there's a lot of humour from that. And if you're a Horrible Histories fan, Simon Farnaby also makes an appearance, and there's lots of jokes about how he and his friend look like Simon and Garfunkel. It is also beautifully shot as well, so many panoramic views of fields and cute little English villages. Next on my list is a film called Their Finest. This is about propaganda filmmakers in Britain in the 1940s during World War II. It stars Gemma Arterton as a lady who is brought in to write the female dialogue in films, what they called the slot at that time. And she is partnered up with Sam Claflin, who is another writer, and they get tasked to write a film based on a true story about two girls who go to Dunkirk in their boat to help rescue soldiers off the beach. This is a film mainly about women not just getting jobs that men used to do, but pursuing careers and jobs that they really enjoyed. So Gemma Arterton's character really enjoys writing scripts. She's discovered it's something she's good at and wants to make a career out of it, but her husband, who's an artist, doesn't understand this, and he thinks she only gets the job because he's not making enough money. And then he starts making more money. He asks her to move with him out of London to another town where he's got a new job, and she refuses, of course, because she wants to continue working on the film, and he just can't understand why she wouldn't just want to go with him and be a happy housemaker. The film is really funny. It really makes fun of the kind of propaganda filmmaking of the era. There's a lot of meta jokes about actors as well. It's one of those films that's billed as your sort of cozy English film, but it has a lot more depth to it. Next on my list is a show called Love on Netflix. This is a show starring Gillian Jacobs as Mickey and Paul Rust as Gus, and we follow the progression of their relationship, starting from when they first meet to becoming friends to eventually being in a relationship together. And normally I do not like shows that are solely about romantic relationships. I found them really boring and usually quite unrealistic. But the thing about this show that's made me really like it and enjoy it is because it feels actually realistic. Their relationship, you sort of see it carry out in real time almost, and they actually become friends before they start dating, which surprisingly is so unusual in so much TV and film. It's really interesting to see how they are very different people, but there are these certain things about each other that make them really attracted to each other. It's also very funny. It's a very self-aware show, and it has an interesting mix of performances. So there's an Australian character, for example, who has a very sort of monotone, stilted kind of comedic performance that she does, and then you've got Paul Rust, who does a much more naturalistic performance. So there's quite a variety of comedic styles in the show, and they kind of work together and make the comedy quite varied. I like that the characters all have friends and jobs that they actually have to go to, and they live in houses that they look like they could actually afford. Again, the script is the thing that I like the best. It's the lines, especially between the characters of Gus and Mickey, that are really funny and really make it enjoyable to watch. Last on my list is the newest BBC adaptation of Howard's End. I read the book a couple of years ago and adored it, and then I watched the film straight after and also adored that, but I think this might even be a better adaptation than the film. This is a story about the Schlegel sisters, Margaret and Helen. They are sort of upper middle class British people, so they have enough money that they don't need jobs, but they are not as wealthy as this other family, the Wilcoxes, who they met while they were travelling in Germany, where their family is originally from. So the Schlegels love art and literature and music and are immensely progressive. They want to help the poor and go to seminars and are constantly discussing and talking about politics and learning. Whereas the Wilcoxes are self-made, wealthy people who love the social system that they live in and don't want it to change at all, and don't really understand why the Schlegels want to interact with the lower classes. You've also got this character, Mr. Bast, who is a lower class person, but he wants to educate himself and he loves books and music as well. I think the casting in this adaptation is perfect, especially of the two sisters. Amazingly, the girl who plays Helen is actually Australian, so her accent is incredible. And then you've got Hayley Atwell as Margaret, and Hayley Atwell is always brilliant, and she so perfectly portrays Margaret, who is quite a tricky character, I think, to portray, because she has to be immensely likable, and she is a person that we relate to as being smart and intelligent and progressive, but then she also does some things that we question. Of course, if you love period dramas, everything about the production is beautiful, their clothes are amazing. So those are some of my favourite things that I've been watching recently. Please let me know if you've been watching any good TV or films that you can recommend. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!